Hi, I'm Grant,
And I'm Daniel Chen.
and we're going to be talking about the LSAT and truth functional logic. So, a little bit about the LSAT, the law school admissions test. It consists of about five 35 minute sections of multiple choice questions, and there's also an additional 35-minute writing section. This section isn't scored, but copies of the writing that you do are sent to all the law schools that you apply to, so they have that sample and that they can read what you write. So the LSAT is designed to measure skills that are, quote, necessary for law school, such as the ability to read and comprehend complex texts and arguments, the ability to organize and manage information, and then to be able to think critically with that information. There are three different types of questions that they generally ask on the LSAT. Reading comprehension sections just measure your ability to read possibly lengthy and fairly complex material. The analytical reasoning questions simply test your ability to understand like structures and relationships and arguments, and then to draw logical conclusions from that. And then the logical reasoning questions, which we'll be mainly focusing on in this presentation, assess your ability to analyze and critically evaluate arguments that occur in ordinary language, not in symbolic language. And so each of these questions requires the test taker to read and then comprehend a short passage and then answer a question about it. The questions assess a wide range of skills, with an emphasis on those that are central to legal reasoning, like drawing well-supported conclusions, reasoning by analogy, and determining how additional evidence affects an argument, and then applying principles and rules and identifying argument flaws. So that's kind of what this slide says here, just that you have those logical reasoning questions. You're given a short passage and then asked multiple choice questions follow, and those types of questions are included here.
Okay, and just some background about my own involvement in law and mock trial and that type of things. And so for me, it's been a major career choice that I've been looking at throughout high school. It mostly started after mock trial in ninth grade, and I really enjoyed it, which is why I decided to look into this field. And so as a result, I've done research and preparation for law related stuff. I've done 4 years of teen core law internships to constitutional law. And so I feel like I have a decent background in law and that type of thinking style. And so for UT, which is the primary most probable school I'm end up going to, they have no formal pre-law track, and there are no required courses or requirements for someone to take the LSAT. They do have a specialized pre-law service program, which does involve LSAT preparation materials, with suggestions on what courses and majors to take, as well as how to prepare outside of school. And so UT definitely does provide services if you're interested in taking the LSAT. On average, Plan 2 students score a 166 on the LSAT, which is very much so above the national average of 152. And since UT does have its own law school, there are non-tangible advantages of going there, such as in interactions with the law professors, perhaps. The one problem or main caveat of this is that the services are limited to the College of Liberal Arts.
All right, so some background, some of my background in relation to law. I have considered going to law school recently, but I hadn't really thought about it in the past. I'm definitely not as certain as Daniel. I haven't done any internships or have worked in any law firms or done mock trial or anything like that. I am taking constitutional law this year, so maybe that will give me a better sense of whether I really want to pursue that. I do think I'm good at researching and synthesizing and then presenting information. Um, and my father did study philosophy or did major in philosophy at UT. And I know he enjoyed taking logic and did consider going to law school. And so he's always kind of, I guess, pushed me in that direction, or at least shown me that that could be an option. Um, Regardless, I think that law is very important to understand, and the ability to examine arguments and to examine, um, I guess, how people make those arguments is important to anyone to be a conscientious citizen and just a conscientious person in general. The law school that I would consider going to would be at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. Like UT, they don't have a specific pre-law major, and there aren't any required set of classes. Um, on their website, they do recommend either majoring or minoring in philosophy because generally philosophy majors score higher on the LSAT and are better, I guess, thinkers. Um, so they recommend definitely taking classes in the philosophy department. I did find logic courses that they offer at Chapel Hill, all through the philosophy department: Introduction to Mathematical Logic, Logic and Decision Theory, and then a symbolic logic class. Um, and so they definitely do offer logic courses, but really anyone in any major can take or can be on a pre-law track. UNC does have a law school, and so like UT, the resources would be there to help undergraduate students or pre-law students prepare for law school. And you are set up with a pre-law advisor when you get to Chapel Hill that can help you structure your courses to help um, law school admissions. The LSAT scores, the median score for pre-law students at UNC was 161, which is above the average of the national average of 152. And then the middle 50% was between 159 and 163.
Okay, so my LSAT experience. So I got a 20 out of 23 taking the LSAT in the first week of school. And so before this, I had no real formal experience with logic or truth functional logic. But I feel like my score was quite well. And I think the reason why is because I had a very comfortable testing environment. But because I took it before, the first week of class, it's hard for me to gauge if now knowing truth functional logic would have helped me out a lot. And in reflection, I don't really think so because in reflection, I find that few questions were really applicable to truth functional logic, and for the most part, it felt very cumbersome and counterintuitive. Thinking back. There are unclear applications of truth functional logic, which we will explore further on in this PowerPoint. And just for me, I felt that trying to think about truth functional logic while looking at the LSAT was both distracting and kind of convoluted. And in general, I found the LSAT more of a common sense test that was based on your overall experience and not just hard truth functional logic.
All right, so my LSAT, my practice LSAT experience, I scored a 16 of 23, which, given the fact that I had extremely limited experience with this test previously, I really didn't know anything about the LSAT or the types of questions that were on it. So I was happy and am happy with that score. The main problem that I had while taking the test was time. I felt that I was pretty restricted on time, and I wanted to be able to reason and delve into the arguments a little further, but I felt that I was rushing just given the fact that I had to answer so many questions in such a short amount of time. Like Daniel, I thought that truth functional logic wasn't very applicable. I found some instances that it could be used, but I felt that just kind of reasoning out um, and looking at the answer choices and trying to kind of compare those to the question was a lot easier than formalizing it into a structure. So really what I encountered on the practice LSAT were like interpretation and reasoning questions. So just taking an argument in plain English and kind of figuring out its structure and the premises and the conclusion, and then reasoning based on that. And in doing some research, it seems that this kind of reflects pre-law requirements in that it tests and kind of it assesses the ability to think quickly, but to be able to critically analyze texts and arguments in a concrete way.
And so, looking at the LSAT and trying to apply truth functional logic, we're going to take a look at which questions are applicable, which type of questions are applicable, and which type of questions aren't applicable. And so a question that we found on this LSAT that we thought were fairly applicable was question 22. And you can read it right there. It says children who are educated at Evans High School tend to do better than children who are educated at Gilbert High School. Since Samuel achieved higher grades than Gilbert High School, he was educated at Evans. So basically what the question asks for is which of the following most closely parallels the flawed reasoning, and in LSAT terms this is a parallel reasoning problem. And so basically what this question calls for is a comparison in argument structure, and truth functional logic help visualize the comparison. So first we'll break down the original question. Children who are educated at Evans High School do better than children who are educated at Gilbert High School. That naturally follows to if you are educated at Evans High School, then you will do better than children educated at Gilbert High School. If E, then D. Samuel did better than children at Gilbert High School. D. Samuel's educated at Evans High School. E. Okay, and so taking a look at the answers, we're trying to see which one of these argument structures most closely parallels the original question's flawed one. Quarter horses are taller than Appaloosis. Since Dandy is taller than Appaloosis, he must be a quarter horse. So if you are a quarter horse, then you are taller than Appaloosis. Since you are taller than Appaloosis, you must be a quarter horse. If Q, then A, and so Q. And then the answer choice B is when people make money, they are able to accumulate wealth. If people make money, then they are able to accumulate wealth. If M, then A. Answer choice C is when children practice piano scales for half an hour each day, they do well at recitals. Since Hannah practices less than an hour a day, she won't do well. And you can translate that to if children practice piano scales for an hour, then they will do well. Since Hannah doesn't practice, she won't do well. If P, then W, not P, not W. Answer choice D is when children have parents participate, they do better in school. Therefore, if parents want to help children do better in school, they should participate. And this is kind of a weird thing that comes across the problems of truth functional logic, which is it's kind of limited in what it can do. And so if you want to model this, you have to do if children have parents participate, then they will do better. But then if parents want to help, then they should participate. And so if P, then B. If W, then P. And then the last answer choice is it's kind of like the answer choice D as we just looked at. to where it also